Everyone, the time is 10:30 and I'd like to call the District 204 regular, I'm sorry, 10:30. Yeah, it's not that late yet. In my mind, it's 10:30. Welcome everyone, the time is 7:30 and I'd like to call this District 204 regular action meeting to order. I ask that all rise to participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez.
Present.
Member O'Bear.
Here.
Member Vita Daniels.
Present.
Member Dillon. Here. Member Gretchen is absent. Member Thomas.
Here.
Okay, on tonight's agenda, the board will not go into closed session this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented with that change?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda passes. Our next item on the agenda is public participation. This evening, we have decided to hear all comments at the beginning of the meeting. I'd like to read something about our public comment policy. First of all, we'd like to thank you all for coming this evening and to take the time to speak with us and be here. There are generally two opportunities for audience members to address the Board of Education, but tonight we're going to listen to all public participation in our first session right now. The board appreciates and values hearing comments from our community, but please understand that the board does not engage in dialogue or discussion during our meeting. If there is a specific question or a comment that requires follow-up, the appropriate administrator will respond at a later time. Finally, each individual addressing the board will have 3 minutes for their comments, and we really appreciate your cooperation in keeping to this time limit. Particularly tonight, we have a lot of speakers and doing them all in the front. We would really appreciate you keeping it to 3 minutes. In accordance with board policies 2230 and 830, we thank you for keeping tonight's meeting respectful and civil for all in attendance. And with that, Marilyn, will you please call our first speaker?
The first speaker has submitted a request for their comment to be read.
Okay.
Dale Holmquist. To say I was shocked after listening to audio of only one secret meeting is an understatement. To suggest that the Pleasantdale community, residents, schools, and Park District are insignificant and can be bullied into submission was eye-opening. Every member of this BOE has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure the health and safety of their children and all else in communities. If this industrial business was interested in building a North or South campus, you would strike that idea down in a second. Confer with the regarding attorney on your board. Any industrial development near homes, schools, and neighborhoods would be toxic to a prospective buyer. Use Sterigenics' negative impact on the health and welfare of neighboring communities as your compass. Do your job and cooperate with UAG. Represent all residents, not only those closest to Willow Springs and LaGrange. We expect you to represent Indian Head Park, Burr Ridge, and Willow Springs taxpayers too. The land's only use should align with current zoning established by Willow Springs. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Do we have our next speaker?
That is also a comment to be read. That's by Sheila Blatch.
Okay.
Besides the bond sale, what other ways are you considering besides the land sale to fund the strategic plan facilities upgrades? What if the land sale does not net the $55 million, since that is not an appraised value for the current zoning? Has a formal appraisal for the current zoning ever been conducted or requested? A lot of focus has been placed on funding facilities upgrades, but let's not disregard an essential part of D204 standards. Put students first, accept District 107, which is far more than 124 students. Value collaboration except for interested parties regarding the land sale. Provide clear communication and value feedback by conducting improper closed session meetings. Promote a sense of community except if you come from that one small community. An additional comment in regards to your replacement board member request that you consider someone from any of the underrepresented feeder school districts, since the current makeup of the board is heavily weighted to one district, seemingly to provide unfair representation.
Okay, thank you. And our next speaker?
Is also a statement to be read by Kim Barker.
Okay.
My name is Kim Barker, and I'm a parent of 2 recent LTHS graduates and have a few points to make. First, I read through the facilities and long-range plan that was updated from 2019 and thoroughly understand the issues you face while being astonished that the LTHS district has been so poorly maintained with approximately $131 million in needed repairs, I'd ask you to build a 5-year facilities plan that prioritizes this massive list of projects by urgency and year to tackle, as that's what most other schools do. After hearing the very disturbing 123-23 closed session tapes, it's clear no one has done that, as the discussions focused on how to prioritize the many groups that will be asking for money. This should not be a money grab, but a well-thought-out plan, just as you would do as a homeowner. The project should be prioritized. The money is not never-ending, and you must work within the budget you have, not sell out a community like Pleasantdale to get that money. Remember, even if you sold to industrial, you'd still be short over $50 million. Also, having served on Pleasantdale School Board, all board members should have been trained on the Open Meetings Act. However, the intentional avoidance of discussing the sale of the land in open session for at least 8 months prior to going out to bid, and then again after, shows a clear disregard for OMA, the law, and as many of you said many times, a clear disregard for the taxpayers of Willow Springs, Burr Ridge, Countryside, and Indian Head Park. You purposely avoided looping in relevant constituents because you'd rather beg for forgiveness than ask for permission, but you also never ask for forgiveness for your behavior. Isn't that what we teach our children? It always amazes me when politicians make mistakes and don't apologize, since people are generally forgiving. If you ever hope to regain our community's trust, I'd suggest 3 things. A sincere apology from Dr. Waterman and the LTHS board for a serious lack of character and questionable morals and integrity, violation of Board Policy 340, for maliciously intending to destroy our property values, and for plotting to position LTHS communities against each other, for not initiating or maintaining channels of communication between LTHS and the Pleasantdale School District, the Village of Willow Springs, and Pleasantdale Park District, violation of Board Policy 310, and discontinuing the agreement with the law firm Forensic PC, as Mr. Aristelianis not only allowed but participated in hours of closed session conversations that violated OMA, CDIAG's findings, but was providing advice that went beyond legal, but was his opinion on what the Pleasantdale community wants and should be willing to accept on that land. That's not a school attorney's function. You were steered very wrong, and our tax dollars and communities deserve much better. If you decide to sell the land in Willow Springs in the future, please work with our community similarly to how Superintendent Dennis Kelly did in 2004 and 2005. I was at the meetings when LTHS came to our rescue and decided not to sell the land because of what was proposed would not be good for our community or be appropriate next to our elementary school. Thank you. The next one is another statement to be read by Jennifer Howe. In light of the recent OMA violation as determined by the Illinois Attorney General and subsequent release of audio files, it is time for this board to own up to their mistakes and apologize to the community. After listening to the released audio files, I'm extremely disappointed in the behind-the-scenes discussions of this board. It is now clear you gave your very best effort to seek out industrial bids despite the clear opposition throughout District 204. It is shameful you placed a higher value on the opinions of a handful of neighbors over 100+ comments submitted through the proper channels. Furthermore, for all the work on diversity, equity, and inclusion this board has done, it should be clear that any action that will cause harm to any minority in this district should never be considered. The website claims you are committed to creating a safe and affirming environment where every member of our community can learn, grow, and belong, and in order to achieve these beliefs, we must actively work to foster a supportive environment that allows all to feel respected and visible and embraces the rich and diverse identities that each individual holds. Can you not see how hypocritical it is that you made comments insinuating that because the Pleasantdale population is small, our opinions, health risks, and home values do not matter? Members of this board agreed they would fight an industrial sale tooth and nail if it were in their own backyard, meanwhile doubling down on their efforts to bring in a harmful industrial neighbor to our elementary school. Instead of working toward bringing the District 204 community together, you schemed plans to try to pit communities in the district against each other. It is time to reflect on your actions. You've said you are listening and learning. If that is the case, apologize for the mistakes that have been made and the mistreatment of the Pleasantdale community. It is time to commit to transparency and honesty moving forward. Acknowledge your responsibility to community partnership and vow to find a buyer that will align with current zoning for any sale of the Willow Springs property. The next one is Village of Burr Ridge Trustee and Mayor Pro Tem Guy Francesi.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this on?
We won't hear it in here, but it's for the recording.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Guy Francis. I'm a Burr Ridge trustee as well as a LT graduate and resident. I'm here tonight to discuss the board's conversation which occurred on January 23rd, 2023 in closed session. While listening to this meeting, I became concerned about the lack of understanding as to how zoning processes legally occur and the standards which must be met. As a 16-year Burr Ridge Plan Commissioner member and currently a 10-year trustee, I can provide background as to how zoning petitions, such as an industrial development, actually works and what legal hurdles exist in the zoning process. As you are board members in a school district without zoning powers, I want to provide some facts on these issues for your and the public's benefit. In Illinois, municipalities are provided with zoning authority, not school districts. When the zoning authority municipalities may make map amendments, such are known as rezoning. A map amendment, for example, could amend a parcel zoning from residential to industrial. Map amendments are complex and are very much a legal process that do not occur in a vacuum. To determine whether the map amendments are legal, Illinois courts have established the LaSalle factors to determine the legality of map amendments. I did not hear the words LaSalle factors brought up in the closed session discussion, despite their relevance. So I need to do this. I feel the need to do this evening. There are 8 LaSalle factors, all of which must be affirmed to find a map amendment to being proper. The LaSalle factors are as follows: the existing uses and zoning of the nearby properties, the extent to which the property values are diminished, the extent to which the destruction of the property values promotes the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the public, the relative public gain as opposed to the hardship imposed upon the property owner, the suitability of the subject property for the zone purposes, the length of time the property has been vacant and or unsaleable as zoned considering in the context of land development in the area, the care with which the community has undertaken to plan its land use development, and finally, community need for the proposed use. Even if 7 of the LaSalle factors are met, a zoning petition could be thrown out for failure to meet all 8. For example, there is a lack of industrial development in the area which would force industrial development to occur. Has Willow Springs taken care to plan for the land use development when the village has a comprehensive plan and has zoned the subject property as a planned unit development? If you cannot confidently answer these questions in favor of an industrial developer, I question the concept of selling this property to an industrial developer who will need to answer these questions with Willow Springs. I urge the board to educate themselves on the LaSalle factors when making decisions regarding the sale of this land. I am sure your attorneys can educate you on these LaSalle factors. If the sale of the property is necessary to fund improvements, I request the board engage with Willow Springs and the land's neighboring constituents to find more amicable solutions which meet the zoning expectations of the village of Willow Springs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim DeStasio?
My name is Jim DeStasio, and I'm a resident of Willow Springs, or as one board member dismissively called it, one community, one small community. In recordings the Illinois Attorney General ordered you to release. I've addressed this board multiple times since you began your damaging and ill-conceived land sale effort. In each appearance, I held out hope someone would say something that would dissuade you from selling to a buyer that would damage our community's health, our children's school, and our neighborhood. You heard tearful pleas for weeks from parents concerned about their kids' safety due to your land's proximity to Pleasantdale Elementary. You heard multiple municipalities ask you to reappraise your land for its true value at zoning and move forward with community engagement. But after listening to the audio from your January 23rd closed session that violated the Open Meetings Act, I realized you weren't going to do any of those things. You knew industrial was a prohibited use and didn't care a single bit about what that development would do to your constituents south of Joliet Road. I'm often a cynical person about politics, but the indifference from this board toward one of its feeder districts on those recordings was shocking. You spent 2 hours doubling down on a failed approach. You tinkered over a statement that only further inflamed the public. You pondered how to spin a bond sale to our community after destroying it for profit. You plotted as to how to pit District 204 communities against each other so you could prevail. And you decided to reapproach industrial builders after more than an hour of public comment begging you not to. A Willow Springs resident in public comment likened your actions to, quote, human sacrifice, with you demanding one district needlessly die for the greater good. And somehow, your actions over that time managed to drain all of the hyperbole out of that statement. On the recording, members of this board kept mentioning fiscal responsibility in the same way a soldier accused of wrongdoing says, "I was just following orders," as if the words fiscal responsibility are a magic incantation absolving you of your moral agency. And we know, based on your recordings, you knew this action was wrong because you made a conscious choice to keep everyone in the dark for months. After nearly 2 months of public torture, and it was public torture, you never acknowledged how bad you messed this all up. You never attempted to make things right. You continue to write off a swath of District 204 simply because none of you can admit that you made a mistake. When you voted at your last meeting to release these closed session minutes, you had a golden opportunity to explain yourself, to put into context some of the damning and callous things you and your attorney said about our community before we had a chance to listen to it. But you chose again silence, ostensibly standing behind those statements and telling the Pleasantdale community you don't care about us one bit. But we're not writing you off. No, we're not. You took an oath to practice good governance and open communication, and we're going to continue to hold you to that. When and if you reapproach this land sale, please again engage with our community. Work collaboratively with our elected leaders and respect the property zoning. And that means a firm commitment from each of you against selling this land to any industrial buyer. Just give me 2 seconds, I'll be almost done. And in the meantime, please take steps to remedy these mistakes. Start with releasing your closed session recordings detailing your land sale efforts since March of 2022. These are discussions that should never have occurred outside of the public eye, and preemptively releasing these would go a long way toward reestablishing the trust that you all broke. We know you didn't care about our community before January 23rd. We literally have the tapes to prove it. But that doesn't have to be the end of this story. It's not too late for each of you here to make this right. Thank you.
I certainly can't doubt that. I'd like to start with Julie Swinehart. This board knew for the better part of a year that Julie Swinehart was going to resign immediately after graduation. No doubt the board and Waterman were in on it, preventing this seat from being on the election cycle. It's very shameful, and you all know that you were in on it. There's no other way to look at it. Let's get back to the land. Is it policy to incorrectly label every closed session meeting related to the land sale? LT's lawyer Crowley admitted that the board had done this on at least 7 separate occasions in 2022. Crowley classified these as unintentional oversights. Then on January 23rd, he claims this meeting was properly labeled only to have the Attorney General issue a rare binding opinion that they broke the law. Now the Attorney General is reviewing the tapes of the 7 previous mislabeled meetings. We can only expect that those to be as damning as the 2 closed meetings on January 23rd. The first meeting on the 23rd, prior to the open meeting, has LT lawyer stating a few $100,000 could win a court case to force industrial into Willow Springs. That's been obvious to all of us ever since he stood up and said, there's ways around this. Okay, he comes right out and says it. Okay. The second meeting on that day was after the open board meeting. After hearing overwhelming public outcry against industrial, the conversation continues as if they heard nothing, directing State Check to go full steam ahead to court additional industrial buyers. Heard nothing. Jill Daniels' real estate website states, "We are here to listen, talk things over, and advocate for you." How ironic, especially since she is a lawyer who knowingly violated OMA and did her best to deny it on the League of Women Voters debate. Waterman describes his ability to communicate with his colleagues as napalm. True leadership skills, Brian. He states it is better to not ask and do it rather than to ask and do it anyway. Sounds like something you tell your wife. He distorts the as-zoned appraised value as 15 to 20 million, but has no reference the school could share except from 2005, 18 years ago. Again, they refuse to have it appraised at current zoning, even though 1,000+ taxpayers, proponents signed witness slips for Senate Bill 990, while Waterman and Alvarez, yes, Alvarez, the guy who said he was against industrial, contacted every school administrator in Illinois to avoid having to appraise as zoned. Then Waterman, I'm almost done. Then Waterman suggests LT student population is 124 when it's really over 360. And the topper is LT's lapdog, RB Landmark, suggests all opposed to industrial are part of a politically aligned organization affiliated with the TTO. You know, all 4,500 people that signed the petition are all affiliated with the TTO. You guys get your act together at TTO. Don't throw us in the middle of it. Nice try, though. Your Skolnick is here. You know exactly what I'm talking about, because you did the same damn thing on the election.
Mr. Wedding, if you could please wrap
Okay.
up, we'd appreciate it.
Imagine an industrial park next to the playground with trucks and strangers constantly coming and going. And one day a child is missing. Imagine that. Very easy to imagine. Whisked away down nearby 294 I-55. Our worlds all will have changed that day. We need dialogue, not napalm, to reunite the community, which you guys have severely divided, protect our neighborhoods, and most of all, look out for the future of our children. There's some work to do, Brian.
Another statement to be read by Melissa Bersoni.
Okay.
I see tonight's agenda includes a closed session discussion. I hope you understand now that closed sessions are limited to the narrow exceptions cited. As you all know, you are required to hold meetings in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. You failed to do that. Based on the January 23rd audio, it seems that you think you can discuss anything once that door closes. You all took Open Meetings Act training. You should know better, but it is also clear that you are receiving bad legal advice. I was surprised to hear your attorney on multiple occasions during the January 23rd audio telling you that you must discuss the land sale in closed session. Clearly he was wrong. Not only did he give you bad legal advice, but he sat there while you all discussed various topics that were not related to setting the sale price, and in some cases not even related to the land sale at all. Yet the board continues to use the same firm, but a different attorney, to represent them on multiple pending Open Meetings Act investigations. Please find a new attorney who will help you comply with your Open Meetings Act obligation. I also ask that board members take additional Open Meetings Act training and require Dr. Waterman to do the same. The community deserves transparency, yet several times during that January 23rd meeting, you discussed and decided not to provide the community with information. You decided not to tell us you spent $43 million on maintenance in the last 10 years and seemed to suggest we're all too stupid to understand that things are expensive. You decided not to provide any notice of the sale to nearby property owners. You decided not to communicate with Pleasantdale District 107, Pleasantdale Park District, or the Village of Willow Springs about the land sale. As a board, you have a duty to communicate with the community. Please take some steps towards improving transparency, and please remember that communication goes both ways. Many members of the LT community have spoken out in opposition to the land sale. At that January 23rd meeting, there were over 30 of us speaking, yet your comments on the audio made it clear that you weren't hearing us. You seem to think it's just the people who live right next to the property who are speaking out about this. Most of us do not live adjacent to the land. Many of us would be thrilled with a Starbucks or literally anything on that land that complies with current zoning. You don't seem to grasp the fact that the issue is with industrial next to a school. Please listen to your community. Don't brush us off as selfish idiots. We are members of the LT community and we deserve to be heard. Please start listening. The next one is Lisa House.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Hauk. I grew up in Western Springs, attended Lyons Township High School, met my husband there, and raised two children who also graduated from LT, all while building a life in Willow Springs, Pleasantdale District 107 for the last 31 years. While my kids were getting an amazing education at P-Dale, I had the privilege and honor of serving on many PTA committees, curriculum council as we were making an entry into state-mandated Common Core, and 8 years on the school board. I know what it feels like to sit on the other side of the table and the level of responsibility that comes with being an elected official. For that reason, I chose to observe this process play out. I attended BOE meetings, listening to my friends and neighbors plead their reasons for no industrial on Willow Springs property with little to no representation, speaking out on behalf of the other side. I've read the articles poured through social media, received the election propaganda via text and mail, politically dividing District 204 with disturbing labels and private agendas. By the way, a Board of Education election should never be rooted in politics. I really thought at some point this would turn around and the BOE and administration would realize the devastating effects industrial development would have on their future students, as well as the 5 tax-paying communities surrounding the property. I'm disgusted to see where we have landed. To make matters worse, the Illinois Attorney General's office issued a binding opinion holding District 204 BOE in violation of the OMA for the January 23rd closed session meeting. This is the worst ruling that a BOE can receive and will be used in future cases as a poor example of Board of Education management and operation. And for those who don't know, other OMA violations are still pending decision. This could have all been avoided had you invited key stakeholders to the table for collaborative and thoughtful discussion instead of shoving this down our throats once the deal had all been but signed. a true disregard for all that is reasonable and fair. As the released January 23 closed session tapes have revealed, yes, you have unequivocally, quote unquote, napalmed these relationships. This was not focused on, quote unquote, one community, one small community, but we have 5 communities who funnel into Pleasantdale District 107, 5 communities who pay taxes to support District 204. Please note that as the Waterman Gate tapes suggest, we do not have 124 P-Dale students currently enrolled at LT. We have just over 400, with more in the pipeline. Unless, of course, parents have opted to move their children out of LT and into private schools, which, given our current ranking and reputation, provides something to ponder. You mentioned how an industrial development will adversely affect our property values, but later state the need for more green space. I guess property values and green space are only a concern if it applies to your neighborhoods. And then to suggest a conspiracy theory is just mind-boggling. Anything to distract from the facts and justify your negative behavior, thus confirming you are public enemy number 1 because you've created this debacle. I'm almost finished. What is most troubling about these closed session conversations is no mention of how the health and safety of the students of Pleasantdale could be affected. All that is discussed is the money grab for the property if sold to an industrial developer. No concern for those who are most vulnerable and will be closest to harm's way. Profits over people. Pathetic to say the least. You have stated that the sale has been tabled for now, but because of the continued deception, lack of addressing our concerns, and use of taxpayer dollars to hire 2 lobbyists to fight against SB 990, you have violated our trust. We will continue to be steadfast in our efforts against industrial development. We will not be your sacrificial lamb. Sell the land, but sell it for what it is zoned for. Sure, I'll take a Starbucks and Pilates studio all day long, and I'm not speaking for the rest of you.
I'm sorry, if we could please wrap it up, that would be great.
In closing, I heard someone say on the tapes, what's next for us? I think the bigger question is, where do we go from here? How do we repair the damage that has been done, and how do we move forward as the cohesive District 204 we have always been? We are all LT, whether you want to recognize it or not. So my question for you is, what's next for all of us?
Chris, Brenda,
I'm gonna skip
okay. Patrick Murray,
Good evening. My name is Patrick Murray. I'm a resident of Willow Springs. You've all heard me speak before. We've been here now for, approximately 6 months trying to still get answers. Those answers were not going to come forthright from many of you, obviously. They were only done because the Attorney General's office issued that binding ruling. And, I always, first of all, I'd like to applaud the other residents that have spoken because they put a lot of time and effort in preparing statements. That's just not my style. I just tell you how I feel about it. And it's a shame that initially, this board was looked at as villains and oftentimes referred to as being arrogant. And I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt until I heard the tapes. And the tapes show exactly that this board is arrogant. This board sat in closed session, discussed things that they shouldn't have discussed, all at the peril of the residents of Willow Springs and the Pleasantdale School. That's horrible. I don't know if any of you sit at home and think about it at night, but collectively, you all are villains. And Mr. Thomas, I'll tell you, I saw a transcript of one of the conversations you had in those closed sessions. I'll tell you what, you're spot on. What you said in there was spot on. Don't let your other board members dismiss what you think, because what you said in there was spot on. So for that, I just hope that, I truly don't have any faith that anything that anybody in this room is going to say is going to make any difference to any of you, but I hope that at some point in time it does.
Kathy McCarthy,
My name is Kathy McCarthy. I'm sorry, I hate talking, this public speaking nonsense, but, okay, my name is Kathy McCarthy. I'm a Pleasantdale parent and adjacent homeowner to the Willow Springs property that you recently tried to sell to an industrial developer. Hearing the tapes that were ordered released by the Attorney General's office, I was saddened to hear not only of the disregard you have for our community, but of your intentions to knowingly harm us. Whether it was indifference or an attempt to conceal the harm, you failed to publicly discuss the sale during the 8 months you negotiated it in improper closed sessions. Listening to the tapes, it is clear that your public silence was an intentional strategy. Part of your oath requires extensive engagement with the community. I would argue you violated this oath. Your actions caused our community untold worry and concern over the last 6 months. Some of us with young children contemplated what years of exposure to toxins would do to our kids' health and whether we should move. You made us use our time and efforts to research the Freedom of Information Act, the Open Meetings Act, zoning laws, the school code, environmental toxin studies. You made us get babysitters so we could attend these board meetings and tell our worries to you, a board who would often not look at us, not engage with us, and generally appear annoyed with our presence. We had countless sleepless nights. Hours were spent trying to understand our rights. Constituents should not have to undertake such measures in order for the school to behave properly. If any of you on this board felt like this land sale has been a hardship for you to endure, try walking in our shoes the past 6 months. In listening to the closed session tapes, I was confused by the notion that confidentiality was a reason for not being more public with the sales transaction. There is nothing confidential about this land. You are not a Fortune 500 company. You are a public body, and this is public land. If you are dealing with a private business that asks for confidentiality, you or your business agent or your lawyer has a duty to make it clear that you're a public body subject to public disclosure laws and have limited rights to keep information confidential. I hope this process has taught you the value of community participation and transparency. You're entering closed session. I'm sorry, I wrote this when I thought you were going into closed session. I was going to say you're entering closed session under C1 of the Open Meetings Act. And I was going to say I hope you have a conversation with your legal counsel about transparency in the future. Remember, your attorney works for you, and if you value transparency, your attorney will act accordingly. While I'm extremely disappointed and hurt by how this board chose to go about the sale, I will say that as a community, we are ready to engage with you when you're ready to mend fences. I encourage you to release the closed session discussions you had about this property. Given the recent binding opinion against you, it's highly unlikely your other sessions on this land exceeded the narrow exemption set by the Open Meetings Act. Ultimately, you could have saved yourself and our entire community a whole lot of time, grief, and heartache if you chose a more collaborative approach to start. I'm almost done. Barring that, you could have simply admitted you did not handle this right and promised to do better in the future. Please respect the existing zoning for this property, publicly assure your constituents you will not sell to industrial developer, and proceed with more care, consideration, and transparency. Thank you.
Becky Lawrenson.
Hi, Becky Lorenzen from Community Diversity Group in LaGrange. I just want to thank those of you on the board and in administration that attended our Juneteenth celebration yesterday. It was really wonderful. And also for your support of diversity, equity, and inclusion this year. I won't speak much tonight, but there is going to be a mosaic project that I'll be sharing more information about, where we're going to be inviting everyone to participate in making a mosaic on the East Side Community Center. So wait for more later. Thank you.
Good evening. So the March meeting, online documentation showed that the summer curriculum workshops for world history and English would be using principles from Cultivating Genius by Dr. Ghulam Muhammad. I'd like to know who read the book prior to authorizing use of it. A quote from page 66. If we seek to get it right with populations that have been underserved by schools the most, a productive starting point must be to put sanctioned curricula in place designed by people of color for youth of color so that all educators and all children can achieve it. I'd like to know who agrees with that statement and how are you going to implement it? You've got a diverse community here, and if you start trying to split that community up, I don't even know how you could operationally make the school work. So I'm gonna leave it at that for now, but I read the book. If you haven't read it, take the time to read it and see what's being used to design the curricula in the school you're the board for.
public comments for this evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our first agenda item. We first have a superintendent report. Dr. Waterman.
Thank you, President Albert. I want to start by recognizing yesterday's Juneteenth holiday, as Becky talked about, which marks the day that slavery was abolished, June 19th, 1865. Yesterday, our leadership team did have the chance to participate in the 3rd annual Juneteenth Day celebration, which was sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph, also Eastside LaGrange residents, the Park District of LaGrange, and the Community Diversity Group. The theme was "No one is free until everyone is free," which included an address by Eastside LaGrange resident and former D204 board member and LT alum, Dr. Bessie Boyd. Dr. Boyd shared her stories of growing up as an African American in LaGrange and obstacles that she was able to overcome. It just really was a wonderful experience and opportunity to celebrate such an important historical event with our community. June is also Pride Month, and LT continues to celebrate the extraordinary contributions of the LGBTQ+ community and their invaluable presence in the arts, in the sciences, politics, business, education, and beyond. The perspectives and talents of our LGBTQ community enrich our world in countless ways, and LT is committed to cultivating an environment where everyone, including those in the LGBTQ community, feel that sense of belonging. I think every year, Pride Month provides us with an opportunity to reaffirm this commitment of fostering inclusivity, promoting acceptance, and creating a future where love prevails over hate. Moving on to the next item, it's my honor tonight to present our final Vita Plena Award winner recipient of the school year. For those not familiar, the Vita Plena Award has been presented by the superintendent to a deserving individual since way back in the mid-90s. The award is generally presented to an individual who embodies the theme of inspiration, of creativity, kindness, selflessness, and really just overall someone who goes above and beyond in service to our school community. So as we looked to honor a staff member with the Vita Plena Award for Q4, Greg McLean, who serves as our night foreman of our buildings and grounds staff here at North Campus, was a natural choice. Greg was hired in August of 2003 as a temporary second shift custodian, and then progressed to become a permanent full-time third shift custodian in November of 2003, then assumed the role of assistant building foreman here at North Campus in April of 2017, so about 6 years ago. Greg, as our staff knows, is renowned for his kind demeanor, his aptitude for problem solving and solving issues that come up. He always consistently upholds the highest standards as a member of our LT team, and our leadership team and our staff appreciate his willingness to always help out and always go above and beyond. I think most importantly, we're proud to work with Greg as he provides leadership and support to our North Campus maintenance staff, and really everything that he does embodies what the Vita Plena Award is about, which is why we're honored to recognize him here tonight. So, Greg, congratulations, and thanks for all the ways that you support our LT community.
Yeah, it's my wife, Krista.
So this is Greg's wife, Krista, here joining. There you go.
Very nice, thank you.
So, again, thank you for everything you do for this community.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Greg.
you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
It's always fun to recognize really good people and individuals here. So, Greg, thanks again. I also want to highlight tonight's monthly FOIA report. The district has received 11 FOIA requests since the May meeting, and those are included as an itemized list at your table setting here this evening. And then finally, tonight is the board's final regular action meeting of the 22-23 school year, which concludes what has certainly been an eventful, successful, and certainly at times challenging school year. Later tonight, we're going to hear about a ton of successes as Dr. Tyrell will share a summary of the academic accomplishments, the extracurricular accomplishments, and the athletic accomplishments of our amazing students. And so with that as a backdrop, I just want to share with the board my appreciation to our board, to our leadership team, to our staff, our students, our parents, guardians, and community for everything that went into this past school year. when we set off in a new year, just like all school years, it's impossible to predict all the twists and turns that will occur or that have occurred. But at the end of the day, we have an unbelievable responsibility and an opportunity to shape the hearts and minds of our students and ultimately impact our school community, the LT community, in amazing ways. This takes dedication and commitment, certainly, but it also takes resolve to continually make decisions that benefit all of our 4,000 plus students, 400 plus staff, and all 11 of our communities. So most importantly, I hope that everyone, our board perspective, has arrived at summer feeling proud of what you've accomplished this year, but even more so, really excited about the work that we have ahead and the opportunity we have ahead of us. So I wish everyone a great summer, and that concludes my superintendent report for this evening.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thanks to all. It has been all of the things that you've said about the school year and more, and I think all of us are very invigorated about the summer, but
The work
also
we
moving
have,
into the fall.
For
So
sure.
thank you. Okay, next we'll move on to our new business action items. The first item will be adopting a resolution commending and celebrating Julie Swinehart for her years of service on the District 204 Board of Education. So with that, I would like to read a resolution. Whereas Julie Swinehart faithfully served as a member of the Board of Education since 2021, and during her tenure served as chairperson of the Finance Committee and a member of the Facilities Committee and a member of the LTCAC. And whereas the aforementioned school board members have given generously of themselves to the task of providing quality education for all of the students at Lyons Township High School. And whereas the aforementioned school board member has unselfishly devoted her time and energies not only to their duties as members of the school board, but also her understanding and appreciation of public education in our American society. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Lyons Township High School District 204 warmly expresses its gratitude and appreciation to Julie Swinehart, pays tribute to her leadership, abilities, and accomplishments, and wishes her continued success during the years ahead. And we're going to sign that today. So with that, we have
Small token of the board's appreciation, Julie.
Well, I don't know, perhaps, yeah, maybe it's another way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. I was on Bozo Circus in second grade. I feel the same. Love it. Oh my gosh, a whole slew of you. No, you guys are too kind. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Julie, we so appreciate the years of your time and talent and energies that you gave to District 204. I mean, your passion, your commitment to this community, your commitment to the students of our community and to every member of our community was undeniable and contagious. And me personally, I've enjoyed working with you so much. Wish we had had more time, but really wish you well in your future endeavors, and we're very grateful for the time that you were able to dedicate to this role. So thank you.
Thank you. I thank each of you for all the great work that you do. I'll miss you dearly. It was a humbling experience. I was honored to serve, and I just cannot wait to see the great work that this administration and board is going to continue to do on not just one topic, but so many topics that you have in front of you. You've got real opportunity to keep elevating LT, my alma mater, my mom's alma mater, and my son Brandon's and almost my twins' alma mater. But yeah, circumstances changed, and I, it's with a heavy heart that I leave, but wishing each of you all the best. Thank you.
So I just want to say, it's been a pleasure working with you, Julie, on the board, and just like your optimism that you've had, as well as like empathy that you brought to, you know, all of the situations that we've been in. So I just wanted to say appreciate that candor and also that commitment and passion that you've provided and energy to the board. So we will miss it. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
And I would like to add that, you know, it's been great. It was great sitting next to you, being the seat, you know, here, and really just, you were always so positive and just really, you know, always optimistic about where we were heading and what we were doing, and you've made me a better person. So thanks for being part of this.
I'll miss you, being neighbors there.
Michael moved in. I don't know.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Tim,
The only thing and again, the youngest of the board here, we campaigned against each other 2 years ago, and I will just briefly say that it was okay that I lost, because I appreciated your vision, and the things that you stood for were not far from what I did as well. So it was an honor to lose to you, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
And Tilly, just same sentiments that everyone else has said, but just to add that, you know, you are very sound, level-headed, bird's eye view, a great way to kind of level set for everybody and provide a big picture perspective. Was really, really insightful and valuable, and again, always with such a smile, and it came from a place of passion, because I saw it through and through. I ran into it almost every kind of event here, because you absorbed it. Didn't matter if it was your kids that were in it or not. You were there and taking it all in and enjoying what this amazing creative community of high school students has to offer everybody. So thank you for doing that, and we wish you just the best of luck.
Thank you.
For sure. Thanks.
I would echo all that, Julie. Thank you. I mean, you have been here at events, as Carrie said, just in a really awesome way. And your passion, your dedication, your advocacy has been nothing short of amazing. And all the best as you move to Boston.
Yeah, thanks. Everyone's welcome.
All right.
And Andrea, thanks for.
I mean,
Yeah.
Jen Tyrell is we said we've seen him at a few events.
We see each other a lot, Julie. We see each other a lot.
This
We're gonna
is
miss
true.
you.
That's
Thanks for
true.
all your support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Andrea, thanks to you and your family too
Yeah.
for sharing
Yes.
Julie with us, because we realize it is a
lot of late
big
nights.
commitment to the whole
Yeah.
entire family as well. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
With that, can I have a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member O'Bear?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to go back to some unfinished items. I apologize in my excitement to recognize Julie. I skipped over. So we are going to go back to our first unfinished business action item, and that would be our second reading of Press 111 updates with Ed Piotrowski.
Thank you, President O'Bear. As you may recall, at the May board meeting, we presented 14 policies for review that were part of Press 111. As a reminder, District 204 subscribes to the press service through the Illinois Association of School Boards. That service works with the Association of School Boards and their legal team to review changes to school code language, new legislation, things along those lines that have an impact on school board policies. And they subsequently will release press updates, which would have those recommendations for updates and revisions throughout the school year. We are currently in Press 111, and there are 14 policies for review. 4 of those policies are policies that are really in the review and monitoring section, which means there haven't been any changes to these policies in the past 5 years, but Press recommends that we review them once every 5 years, just to make sure that the board reaffirms and reviews these policies. And then we have 10 draft policies in Section 2 that may have updates that are administrative in nature that don't affect the way that the policy is interpreted, and then some that are some new language. Generally, those are ones that have been reviewed by our legal team. There have been no changes to what the recommendation was from May till now, and we do have just one note about policy 6230. There was some question about that at the May board meeting, so we have that highlighted in the memo as to what the recommendation would be, but at this time, there are no changes from what we presented in May at the first reading. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
We discussed this a couple of weeks ago. Do we have any additional questions for Ed about this policy?
I think so.
Okay. All right, can we have a motion to approve the Press 11 updates as, Press 111 updates as presented?
So moved. Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Rita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So our next unfinished business action item is the second reading and update to policy 2150 committees. And for that, we'll start with Dr. Waterman.
Yeah, so the board has discussed this previously as well, but just as a reminder, back in January during the Press 110 review, the board requested additional information regarding policy 2150. With the change in committee structure a couple of years ago, our existing board policy doesn't match the board's practice anymore. So we sent this to Franzik. They recommended the board approve an updated policy 2150 as outlined in the attachment. It updates, or I'm sorry, it reflects the current board committee structure, but also includes a parent-teacher / behavioral interventions committee to the list of standing board committees. So the goal would be to ask the board to approve this tonight, and then we'll work on a structure and have this ready for the fall to start.
Okay, excellent. Any discussion or questions from the board?
I think so.
No? All right. Okay. Can we have a motion to approve the updates to policy 2150 committees as presented?
Second.
Okay, so Tim and Jill. Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Rita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Albert?
Yes. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, moving back to new business items. Our next new business agenda item is the authorization of bid specifications for the projects related to the 2023-2024 bond sale. And for that, we will ask Mr. Brian Stachek to speak with us about this.
Thank you, President Aubert. So, as you may recall, we talked extensively about this this particular proposal here at our committee of the whole meeting a couple of weeks ago. And really, we talked about the extent of all of the feedback, input that we've received, really directly to the administration, to our architects, and looking at, again, that facilities plan that we have, that we recently put together. We have kind of, phased this out into separate projects. And so, as we talked about during that meeting, our Phase 1 projects, these are the ones that have kind of come to the top of, the recommended list for the renovations to the buildings as part of those bond sale projects. And again, just a quick refresher, typically the district sells bonds every 10 years. And those bonds are then paid off in that 10-year time period, and then the district will look to do that again. And again, those bond sale proceeds, the district, to my knowledge, has never used those for anything other than building renovations. And so if you look on page 49 of your packet, you'll see again those Phase 1 projects that we talked about. One of the foremost is air conditioning and temperature control in our facilities, in particular the wing here at North Campus, the southwest wing here at North Campus, along with modernization of those classroom spaces. We talked about the renovations to the existing elevator here at North Campus, and also renovations to the toilet rooms at exits 3 and 4. Over at South Campus, we talked about the renovation of the toilet rooms in the A wing, the B wing, and the C wing on both floors there. And then finally, we talked about we also talked about the renovation of the student cafeteria at South Campus. And then we also looked at the opportunity for an additional turf field. And right now, the recommendation is to add an additional turf field to West Field here at North Campus, as we already have a turf field at South Campus. And so, as we discussed with our architects, we went through, again, how we arrived at all of these recommendations. And so, tonight, what we'd be asking the board to do is to approve the creation of bid specifications for these projects. Again, you may recall that as we talked about, not all of these projects are going to happen in one summer. There will be different bidding, we will bid them at different times of this sort of 3-year period, because really you have about a 3-year period in which to spend any proceeds from a bond sale. And so we're still working with our architects to determine the sequencing and phasing of phase 1 and how we would add those add those projects to the list for the summer work each year. So not all of this is going to happen in 1 year. It would be over the course of probably 3 summers, beginning in the summer of 2024. Some of it may go through a school year. That's entirely possible here as we talk about, especially in particular the cafeteria renovation at South Campus. There may have to be modifications to a cafeteria for that entire school year. We did that here in 2014 when we renovated the cafeteria here at North Campus. And so there will be some, obviously we'll talk with the board about that as we get to the point where we understand the sequencing and how we're going to move forward with that. So that being said, we talked a little bit about the total cost, the anticipated cost. There were a couple of different phases we talked about with the architects, and we said, look, there could be anywhere from 26.5 million to $31 million, and then with an additional phasing piece of that, we could have been up to as much as $35 million over the course of that work. And so, as I mentioned in the executive summary, the district would most likely have to add an additional, from $6 to $10 million worth of, reserves in order to cover the cost of those projects, which we believe at this point seems as though it's a reasonable number for us to utilize. And so one other question that we had was in terms of architectural costs. I added that to the executive summary as well. And in my conversation with the architects, we would probably anticipate 7 to 8.5% in terms of total cost to the project, which would be the architect's cost. And again, I mentioned during the meeting too that about 80 to 85% of their cost really is upfront with the creation of the bid specifications. Once that is done, and again, remember the bid specifications aren't just bid specifications; those are drawings, those are architectural plans. It's really what they do in terms of helping the district and assisting the district with these projects. And then the other 15%, 20% is really related to construction management once the projects are underway. But again, the majority of that cost that we have with them is upfront in their drawings and creation of bid specifications. So that being said, what we'd like to do tonight is, based on those phase 1 projects, we would be asking the board to approve the creation of bid specifications for those projects as presented. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that anybody has tonight.
I just have a question out of curiosity. You said that, with the bond sale, you've only known it to be used on, property improvements. What else would the bond sale be used for?
Well, in particular, depending on the type of bond sale, there are districts that use those funds for operating expenses. Okay. We do not do that here, nor would I recommend ever doing that there, because if you're using bond sale proceeds to fund your operating expenses, you probably have some sort of a deficit, potentially a structural deficit, and you're using those dollars to cover that up. But you can't borrow the money forever many districts will pay off bonds over a 20-year period. And so you might have that influx of cash for a short-term sort of fix, but then you're going to have to take additional remedies at that point. So we do not use them for that purpose. It has been for the purpose of the building.
Okay, I was just curious what else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we're not in a position to do that.
Yeah.
So I know she's asking about what else, but if we go back to past bond sales, was the swimming pool at South Campus used for that?
Correct.
And then also the field house at
Correct.
South Campus? Those kind of big projects like that were used for these?
Yes.
For bond sales?
Cafeteria
That's correct.
here, the auditorium renovation
Yes.
here as well.
Okay. 2004, 2005 at South Campus was the swimming pool and the field house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thank you for getting the additional quotes that I had, with, and I know asbestos is to come.
We will work on the asbestos quote. What we'll do is, as we get to that, again, that sequencing part with our architects, we will have our asbestos consultants come in and then review those areas so that we'll have an idea in terms of, under the phase one of phase one, I guess, if you will, in the summer of 2024, we would look at, okay, here's the cost of the projects, here's the architectural cost, and then here is the cost of any asbestos removal that's involved with those projects. And my hope would be we can get something along those lines in August to the board, because at that point, we're planning on also bringing back the architects. Based on our conversation from the committee of the whole meeting, we're going to go back and really bring in some more detailed information for us. So at that point, we'll probably have that sequencing. We'll also ask our asbestos consultants to give us some ideas in terms of cost for that then as well.
It's very exciting. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't have any questions, but I guess I'd just like to highlight, I appreciate the work in bringing ADA, pieces of ADA up to par, making sure that we're focusing our energies and time on that, and learning spaces. The other thing I'd like to say is, the work that you guys have put into creating this, being a member of LTCAC, hearing from the community. I'm one of 7 and also a community member, but I know that a lot of voices were shared in this development of this plan, and I really appreciate that, so thank you.
Brian, with respect to the cafeteria and some of the projects, there were some options that we were presented with a couple of weeks ago. How will those show up in the bid specifications?
So I don't know that we will bid, and again, I have to go back and talk with our architects about that. We're gonna probably make a decision and say, look, this is the one that we're moving with going forward. I don't know if the plan is to bid those 2 projects separately. It's to go with one of those and then bid that. So that's essentially how we would handle that. There are ways to bid options into a project, alternates, as we call them, alternate bid specifications. But for that, we would be looking at one of those and saying, this is the one we would move forward with.
But we would create bid specifications for both options and then weigh those, because they were very different options.
They are, and I don't think that's the plan right now. I think when we bring the information back to the board, then what we would be doing is we would be looking at which option we want to actually go with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a result of the June 5th discussion, there was interest in bidding option 2.
Right.
And that's, obviously that's, to Brian's point earlier, that's dependent upon future discussions around reserve spending.
Right.
But we can't have those discussions until we know what that bid comes back at. So,
Right.
If the board's comfortable with that, we would like to move forward with doing bid specs for option 2. That's the one we would recommend.
Okay.
And then we'll see what the bids come back at and have that discussion.
Okay. And then, so thank you for that. I think we were all in agreement of getting the bids created on option 2. Remind me, the elevator, we're not looking at the elevator in the south building yet. There was an elevator project that we kind of pushed to the side, and there was some rationale for that, but can you remind me of why that was?
Yes. So part of this project would be the renovation of the existing elevator here at North Campus.
Okay.
We also talked about, at the North Campus main building.
Right.
We also talked about here at the North Campus main building, adding another elevator.
Okay.
And so we did not put that right now into the phase 1 project because there's a lot more architectural planning that's involved with that.
Meaning, we're not asking for bid specs right now.
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We think that we'll probably come back with something in the future regarding that. However, the issue with an elevator is, of course, where do you put it? How is it operational for every floor that's involved? You're potentially building an elevator shaft on the outside of the building. So, and again, those are possibilities. None of that, we're not looking at any of that yet. We're going to get to that point and then bring something back.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Sure.
But there would be an elevator in the South Campus cafeteria plan.
So
Yes.
option 2
Yes.
gives us the opportunity at South Campus to have a second elevator that we don't have.
Correct.
Because it's by design, putting one on the, where the option 2 is going to be located at, which is in
Yes.
that courtyard.
That's right.
Would give us a second elevator.
Mhm.
Sure, great.
And Brian, I just want to know too, I know we always do project variance, like we do an allowance for
We do.
each project. Is that kind of included in this idea, or will that not really? I mean, it's going to be something.
Well,
How does that get handled?
yeah, sure. Well, ultimately, right now, what we have is these sort of, again, as I use the term, reasonably conservative estimates that we work out with the architects. And so what will happen in the bid specifications is that we will write into each specification what we call an allowance amount for the project. And that allowance amount will be there, and again, we worked that out with the architects, what we think is reasonable, really what they think is reasonable in terms of the size of the project. And then we have that allowance amount that's included in the total dollar amount of the contract. And remember, if those allowance amounts are not used, that money is not given to the contractor, it simply stays with the district and we don't pay it out. The contract amount is then reduced through a change order process by that dollar amount that we didn't spend with them. So that's how that process would work. And yes, we would have, those allowances built in. We think that, again, the estimates that we have here are reasonably conservative. We're hopeful that they would come back better than what we see here. But again, we also don't want to say to the board, look, the project is $25 million and it comes back at $40 million. That doesn't make any sense either, So we want to be within a reasonable ballpark of what we know now. And we have to remember too, the other part of this is that if we're going to bid some of these projects now, I say now, meaning in the next coming fiscal year, there will be bids that potentially could go out in the following year, maybe even the year after that. These numbers may not be exactly the same a year from now or 2 years from now. So those are things we have to keep in mind, that they will change as we go. But we would not be able to bid all of these projects and then say to the contractors, thank you for your bid, start the project 2 years from now. They would never agree to that. So they're going to say, no, come back and bid when we would have no bidders, and they would say, come back and bid when you're ready to start the project. We can give you accurate pricing because that protects them too.
But there's efficiencies by going and doing the specifications all now.
Yes. The ultimately what will end up happening is the bid specifications will, they become the property of the district. And once they're done, we have them. And if we ever decide that, look, maybe 2 years from now we decide there's a better use of some dollars, we're going to do something else, we're going to pull back on this project, maybe 4 years up the road, then we do this project. We have the bid specifications and it's done. That really isn't going to change unless we start to change the design of what we put in place. Then that would be, but still, the majority of the work would be done at that point, so.
And then on page 51, because I didn't notice it before when we had DLA here for our last meeting, but that remaining work that's listed there, like how did that come about that it's listed there? Are those just by, are they kind of trying to give us a sense of being some of the bigger projects, the AC wanting to get all kind of wrapped up? Is that kind of where we're still left out?
I'm sorry, where are you looking, Carrie?
Page
51
of the packet.
It's like the last.
It's underneath phase 1 subtotal. It says remaining work.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So those are all of the other pieces that we've talked about that we're saying, look, those are essentially dollars there that, again, related if you look at page 50, right, that remaining work there is just related to the initial piece is air conditioning, mechanical, temperature control with the estimated costs there. And then modernization of classroom spaces. So those are all part of the phases, all of the phases that I should say phases 2, phases 3 of the work. Those are all there. But what we're saying is at this time, those would be some estimated costs for those projects, but we are going to have to, discover a funding source for those and then make the determination on how we would pay for those. We don't have the reserves to pay for all of those projects at this point, and so we have to come up with a different funding source other than a bond sale and the district reserves for the rest of those projects.
Got it. And so they're not including those as part of the bid specification?
Correct. There's no reason to include those now because we don't have the funding source to run those projects. So once we do, whenever that would be, then we would, if we do, then we would move forward with those bid specifications at that time.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
I saw the Corral building was on there, and I always think about like, that as having so much potential and opportunity to be more for who uses it now and then for further for the community too, so.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because further, those items are all on the list, but any further work in planning out the details of those costs money, right? I mean, that's architecture fees, and there's a lot of planning that goes into that. So until there's a discussion around funding sources, it's really not appropriate to go further down the road to plan those projects out.
But to that point, we have them on a list, we have them on our project, in our master facilities plan. So we do have a plan out there that says, these are the items we need to look at, these are the items that we need for renovations, and so they are out there.
Great, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, because I know that there was question that we don't have a facilities plan, but there is a facilities plan
Yeah.
on the website.
February 6th board meeting.
Yeah.
The whole packet's there.
And that's where it's color highlighted and everything like that.
Right.
It's a
600
it's
pages.
this big in
It's a binder,
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So this was the phase 2 and phase 3 that are part of that.
Right.
And there was an additional section that these are the dollar amounts. I don't recall in that so when I look at remaining classroom spaces for North Campus, Vaughn Building, South Campus, in the facilities plan, do we know how many classroom spaces those all amount to? Or is that information you could share with the board at a future?
It is, yeah, we can go back and take a look at all of that.
It's just kind of like the
Sure.
same question as that we've asked before when we talk about air conditioning, like, well,
Percentage.
then what percentage are we,
Yes.
have done in the building versus not? And I'm kind of looking at it from the same angle. As,
Sure.
What percentage, especially when I look at South Campus, the numbers there are, they're quite a bit bigger than North Campus.
Yeah.
So it would be good to know what we're looking at.
Yep,
here.
we can do that.
Okay, that'd be great. Any other discussion?
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
This is-
I think there's nothing on this list that hasn't been a long time, so.
For sure, for sure.
Great.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the authorization of bid specifications for the projects related to the 2023-2024 bond sale as presented?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member O'Bear?
Yes. Great. Okay, our next new business agenda item is the discussion and approval of the 2023-2024 Board of Education meeting dates. And
I can take that
Yep,
quickly,
okay.
yeah. I mean, obviously, it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is the proposed list of board meeting dates for next school year, 23-24. Generally fits the first Monday of the month being committee of the whole meetings, third Monday of the month being regular action meetings. There are 4 exceptions to that where meetings are scheduled on Tuesdays because of holidays and things like that. But other than that, it's presented tonight for approval.
And we've looked at these and discussed these before.
I would just like to ask if there's any way we could have a discussion surrounding the time for the regular action meetings to begin. Right now, we have 7:30. I'd like to see it be moved up a little bit to 7.
It's funny, I was thinking the same thing today. And I was because of coming here at 7:30 and, we've had a lot of discussion about trying to balance the time of the 2 meetings. And in order to do that, a 7 o'clock start, I was thinking the same thing would give us a half an hour more to kind of balance those out. Right now, our committee of the whole meetings start at 6:30. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, I mean, because also, like, as you just said, we have talked about looking at moving strategic plan discussions to the regular action meeting, so that's kind of adding the content. So it would be better to start at a 7 o'clock start time versus, I think in the past, like 7:30 was used because it was like an hour that the meetings happened. So, this is no longer, so I think that's partly if we could make that modification, that would be good.
Would it make sense to have the same modification for both meetings be the same time, or is that, I just like consistency, my type.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I think the 6:30 meetings, like we're still, until we get a feel for the rebalancing of the meetings. Like, it just doesn't seem with a 6:30 start that we're ever, finishing before like 9:30, sometimes even later.
No, I meant like to move the other one. I mean, I proposed 7, but I mean, would it make more sense just that we consistently have them at 6:30? Yeah. I mean, just to have it be consistent, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes.
Is that hard for you with?
Yeah, travel.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and others too. I mean, not just me, but I think others are like cutting it close, trying to get here at,
Yeah.
6:30 from a commute.
Okay. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah. No, what if we tried the regular action meetings at 7 and see how
I'm
it's going?
fine with that. I just like want to move them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because sometimes when we go so late,
Yeah.
I'm a pumpkin.
Well, and I know you are. I know you are, hence the caffeine tonight. If the board is in favor of trying our regular action meetings at 7, and if we're finding out that we're still needing to balance it a little bit more, and we can do that through altering the times further, we could definitely take it up at another time. Just whatever we do here, we're not.
Because I know there's a lot of logistics getting here, but I'd love to see it. I mean, I'd be really happy at 7 to move it up.
Okay.
The only thing I would want us to think about, and I don't think either one will have an impact, but impact to community. I mean, I think that we have people showing up at 6:30. I don't think moving it up a half an hour would impact our community involvement, and then involvement for our administrators. Again, I'm assuming that wouldn't have any impact on.
7:30 to 7 is a pretty minimal change, so it
Okay.
would not have an impact.
So for clarity, for now, we would be keeping our committee of the whole meetings at 6:30 as they have been, but making the change to our regular action meetings from a 7:30 start to a 7 PM start. Okay, all right.
We'll make that change.
We'll make that change, and we were given that change. Can we have a motion to approve the 2023-2024 Board of Ed meeting dates as presented? And the time is not on here anyway, so yeah.
Say as amended.
Amend it such that the committee of the whole meetings will begin at 6:30 PM, and amending the regular action meetings to begin at 7:00 PM. Can I have a motion to approve that?
My motion.
Second.
Mary Ellen, will you please call the roll?
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniel?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member O'Bear?
Yes. Okay, great. So our next new business agenda item is the discussion and approval of the 2023-2024 LTHS Student Handbook. And for that, we will turn it over to Leslie Owens. Leslie? All right.
I'm really excited to finally be bringing this to the board tonight. It's been a long time coming and sort of a labor of love for those of us on the committee this year. So I appreciate this time. I know that the board received this at the end of May, so hopefully you've had a chance to look it over. It is a complete redesign of what our handbook was before. And so we're excited to have a more organized handbook for our students and for our families. Just to describe a little bit about the process that we followed this year, we did reach out to get a multidisciplinary committee. So tapped into some parent and guardian groups to see if there were any parents and guardians that wanted to be involved, different work groups throughout our school community, and then Dr. Tyrell and I co-facilitated this group, and Dr. O was part of that group as well. We planned in advance for the meetings, broke the handbook into, we had a lot of support from my administrative assistant, Jenny Weiler, broke the handbook into smaller sections and provided those to our committee well ahead of scheduled meeting times to give them a chance to look through. And then we met on Zoom for everybody's ease, because families and obviously parents and guardians had all kinds of things going on, and so we were happy to do that so that everybody could participate. We quickly realized that the rewrite was more than just a few edits here and there, and that we really needed to dig in and top to bottom redo the handbook. And so our committee meetings became more about just some bigger conversations about the type of language we want to use in our handbook, the setup, the kind of user friendliness that we wanted to have. And so we looked at the Illinois Principals Association model handbook. We provided those guides to our committee members, as well as looked at some other districts' handbooks and just tried to get a feel for what their organization setup was like, and talked about it from a perspective of our new strategic plan, transparency, what we want people to, how we kind of want to situate the handbook within that, and make it a document that helps everybody understand. It's kind of an abridged version of the board policy manual, really, along with the related practices, processes, procedures, and so we wanted anybody reading it to be able to understand that and see, be able to look up information that would be useful to their students and their family in general. So that's a brief overview of the process. We went through the names of all the committee members are in here. I cannot thank our committee enough. Again, it was 6 or 7 meetings that we met and talked through, and obviously everybody had a different level of understanding of handbooks or had, read them, not read them. And so it's, those committees are always difficult but really interesting to work with because everybody has such a unique perspective and provides something that, you think about in a completely different way and think, oh, we totally haven't thought about it that way, but that's how we should be writing that section or thinking about that. So just a huge, thanks and a lot of gratitude to everybody who was part of that process. The other piece of this is that moving forward, we haven't really had sort of that one-stop funnel where this comes through every year for edits and updates and even just testing links and making sure phone numbers are updated. We've had administrators taking each of their pieces and doing that, but again, where that kind of landed after years and years and years is that you have a handbook that feels a little more piecemeal than it does a solid handbook. So moving forward, we're going to do that in a different way and kind of set up that yearly calendar and have timeframes where administrators are updating their sections that make sense within our calendar. I look across to Scott and think about, he has the academic program guide that's due by, I think it's November, and so making sure that his section in the handbook is updated prior to that so that that information is accurate and consistent when the APG is updated. So we'll run through that throughout the years and make sure that all the sections are updated, and again, just testing everything to make sure that links are still active and the right web page is linked in and you're not being sent somewhere. People use handbooks differently now. We don't go back to that paper handbook as much as we use the online version, and I think families go to the handbook to get initial information and then quickly take that direction and go to the live page that's maintained by either athletics or activities or one of our departments. And so this is a lot more of a resource guide than it is having a list of names and numbers. People can find that information very easily on our website, and we want to keep directing them to that because those updates can be made really quickly and it will be more accurate. But just again, having that process in place is helpful. Obviously, the handbook is flexible with school code, board policies. We have our attorneys review everything and make sure everything is still relevant, and any updates that need to be made will be made. We will make every effort when things are updated to announce that, draw attention to that, but there may be some things that change throughout the year that we have to quickly change in the handbook. But each year we hope to bring this handbook for review and just approval to the board so that we make sure that it is in good working order each year. Any questions about the process or the handbook in general? Hopefully everyone is finding it to be more user-friendly. We're hoping that once we get it active online that we can also put some more user-friendly kind of additions to it, hyperlinking sections and things like that. But we are proud that it seems to be a bit more organized in a way that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, a huge, major undertaking. I compared it to what's currently online, and I was looking through it and just seeing that it's so much more comprehensive and detailed and very thoughtful, and it looks like you've already got some links in here, and so I really appreciate that because that's been a long time coming, and thank you for bringing it to the board table too, for review. I just had some logistical questions about as far as with the handbook. So as the students sit for that fall term, the rules that they were sort of governed by, for lack of a better way, or what they follow with the handbook, that is always whatever's the current one, right? It's not like what followed them. Like with the academic guide, you tend to follow what you received as your academic guide, but the handbook is always supposed to be in real time. That's currently what's active. Do you know, because I felt like there was a lot more here that wasn't there before. Are there any, or would there be any way to notify the community of what those, if there's some significant changes or shifts of things that people may have felt oh, we always did it this way and now this has changed? Do we
Sure.
have a plan for that, or?
We could certainly think about putting some kind of cover letter on it as people
Okay.
click on it on the website and just say, these are some of the sections you may
Yeah,
want to
just some
visit.
way to highlight.
We do have some opportunities at the beginning of the year for students to walk through relevant, student expectations and behavior with our assistant principals, with our, we call them our SEL lessons, but really it's like the welcome back to school, setting expectations for the new year. So that would certainly be a time that we could work directly with students to bring their attention
Yeah.
to it. I
Yeah.
think that's a great idea to make sure that, while we know it and it's new and we've looked through it a few times, that not everybody will have done that,
Right,
so.
right. That's amazing, so, yeah, no, this is incredible.
So is there, well, so I appreciate that. I know it's going to live on the website, but is there opportunity, like, to push it out to send to all students and families, so that in one mailing, at the beginning of the year, after, however it's going to be introduced, after those first couple of days or pieces of that, but that at least like all families get an actual email copy of it so
Yeah, we
that
can
they
send,
have.
an email out for sure with a link to it, and
Right.
then they would be able to pull it up. I think, we will also have just, I forgot to mention this, but we'll have translated copies, and then we'll have, all the languages that are represented, we'll have translated copies available in our offices. We'll make sure that any, family gets the translated email, with the book. We're kind of planning for some new transfer student processes and making sure that any family come in would have access to this as well. So I think that's a great idea that we would just send an email blast, and that would be another way to draw attention to the fact that it's new and that we should visit.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very clean. I think, working in the field, everything that I read was spot on. I guess the only thing I'd like to highlight, and I know you had this in the existing handbook also, but the idea of when a student comes back from suspension, I always focus on the discipline because that's where I live a lot of times. But I really like the idea of how after 3 days of suspension, they're coming back and they're having a meeting with somebody, right? And that's that restorative piece to, we talk about that a lot in theory, and in action, here's where we can see one piece of that. And I think that's really important to highlight. I know there's been a lot of discussion about safety and concerns in our community. And I think it's important to highlight some of these things that we see in practice. Increasing social workers, increasing counselors, doing a lot of proactive things is, in my opinion, essential to the foundations of creating safe spaces for kids. So it was just one piece that I just really enjoyed reading, even though, again, it's not new. And then the only other thing I would say is, going forward next year, if there's a way that you could create some kind of cheat sheet for us to say, here's where we were last year, here's what we're doing next year, just so it's easier for us, but it's also easier for our community to see what changes are being recommended.
Yeah, we could do almost a highlight of changes, this section, what you can find that's different. I think that'd be great. And I appreciate the discipline. Kudos to Dr. Tyrell and all of the APs working really hard to, and our student services staff working really hard to have those reentry meetings. It's so essential to make sure that whatever happens, when students come back in our building, they're welcome back. They know that they are back on equal footing and ready to start back positively. So that's been really awesome to see that, and then to align students with supports that they need. Moving in the right direction. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, I was stunned when I looked at the old one compared to this one. I mean, really, like, to your point, I was, looking at, I had one on each screen with the intent to see where the changes are, and I just, I reviewed the old one, and I kind of knew the old one already, and just had to go to the new one, because it's entirely different, which I really appreciate. And I do think that, while this year it may have been an inordinate task to share with us what's new, because it's all new, kind of, I think that is a great suggestion moving forward. That would help a lot. I also, noted that I really like that board policy is tied in there and it's accessible in that manner. Although I do, I shudder to think about the press updates and how often, because we're not in many of the areas of the new student handbook. It's not just a hyperlink, but the actual policy is there. So I'm assuming you have a a way to understand, like, you know, when a certain policy that we're looking at, where it all lives, and.
That's a
you know.
really good question that we'll have to think about when, if it's not just the link and it's just the language, we'll have to make sure that those get updated, but.
The policies that are wholesale, actually will be a bit easier because we can just take out the old and plug in the new. But I do think as I was reading through, and we were looking at kind of model handbooks, giving parents access to that and our community access to the policy, I think is important. Now, we don't expect them to read through our entire board policy manual.
No.
But to let them know where this is all coming from and why we're writing policies or why we're writing practices and procedures the way we are, I think is important. But definitely that's part of that process that we want to get into over the years is having a really standardized process for making those updates so we're not leaving things out or missing something. So I think that's, you know.
Well, and it's nice because you do have the hyperlink, so I'm sure in some areas it made more sense to have the policy right there so that it doesn't
Spelled out.
require somebody to click to go to it, which I think is important for several things, and I'm sure you'll find areas where the hyperlink will probably, you know, but fantastic job. Really was impressed with it, and I know in a lot of ways it's to your point, reorganizing and documenting for better access to all the things that we're doing, and it's a great resource.
Yes, I had a question when you talked about, what Michael had asked about the translation of it, you know, so will there be, I mean, I don't want it to be proactive on our end to have to send it to someone to be translated, because they may not have that to be the ability to ask for that. So I would love to see it to be like where you could have a translate button like you have for so much of the other websites, so a parent could choose to do that.
For sure. Anything that's on our website, from what I understand, uses Google Translate, there's that functionality, but by some of the new standards for translation through Illinois State Board, we have to have certain things like at the ready in Translate already.
Right, no, right,
so.
but there, I would like them to see it on the website, that they could do it on their own versus
For sure.
you having to think, oh my gosh, this parent might need a translated version of it.
And we will be capturing more information about how families want information provided to them through our online registration process this year. So we will already know families who are saying, I'm okay, send me everything in English, or families who say, I absolutely want translated materials. So I think that will help us too.
That's
to really
great.
focus in on families and making sure that they get the information they need in the right format. We want to make sure that translations are accurate too. We know that Google Translate is great, but we're always nervous, especially with a lot of jargon, that it's not just translating into something that's indecipherable. We want to make sure that it's translated well. So we will be working on that this summer. But yeah, we want to make sure that all our families are able to read this top to bottom without any accessibility issues.
Okay, I love that. And then I have one more question. When you're looking at English learners it would be on page 35. There's two different terms. There's EL and ELL you have in there. Is there a reason why it's ELL?
You know, we have tried to nail down one term, and it is used differently throughout even like these materials, but I'll go back and look, and if we can make that consistent, we
Because
certainly will.
yeah, I just would love to see consistency with that, or have it be ELL/EL
Every
throughout
time
that.
we change it to be one consistent way, the state then changes it to a different
Right,
format.
but even within
So,
that paragraph,
yeah,
there's
for
there's
sure.
ELL and EL.
I have a feeling that it was a holdover for whatever we kind of pulled in from our old one that.
Okay.
It's been EL, right? Like EL's been the most consistent one we've used here, or is that changing?
It really depends.
Depends on the context.
It really
Yeah.
depends.
Yeah.
It's gone back and forth, and then like Scott said, it depends on the context. Even when we went through the audit, there were
Right.
pieces of information we were getting with different terms, so.
Yeah.
It seems like they.
Yeah, I just was like, just what would be the appropriate term? Because I'd love to see the appropriate term in here versus both of them to have. But I think it looks great. It's really easy to understand, and so much work is evident that it went into it.
Thanks, to you and your team.
Yeah,
I think having this just as a base too, I think even for like Dr. Tyrell and stuff, like we can make it more, we can refer to it more now that we've got something really solid and proud and thorough. That then I think you'd get more in the habit of being able to say, refer to this, and then people would even get more accustomed to using this tool and being able to go there for information. So it's a really, really valuable tool for the community.
Yeah, I agree. We appreciate Dr. Owen's leadership on this effort. It's a great effort, and just to have something that's more organized, more accessible, that then we can, on a regular basis, go back to and make those reviews on certain sections and take a look at those sections collectively moving forward. So it's a great job, so thank you.
And the hyperlinks. I mean, we talked about this. Didn't we talk about this like last year, maybe 18 months ago? And I was like, that would be great to have that, and it's here, so it's great.
It's definitely work that takes a lot of time, and so again, putting a process in place, I think, is what we're most excited about.
Well, and this is
the big
we just
one.
talked about policy 2150. This is a topic that will be discussed next year with board member input throughout the year because of policy 2150.
And having that multidisciplinary, having different, it just is so helpful because you really can't think of every angle. You're not thinking of the angle of, the parent guardian necessarily or the student. So having those angles is really important, and it helps make it a better, more user-friendly process. So we are happy that it's at this state. We know that this is the beginning, honestly. It's not the end because it's now in a format that, like Dr. Tyrell said, now we can actually dig into each section even a little deeper and say, is this how we want this process to look? Or do we want to change that? But we almost couldn't even get to that part because it was so hard to sort of decipher through before. So I think this is a really good start for us, and we'll just continue to make it better and better.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
So yeah, we would just ask for the approval of the handbook for the 2023-24 school year. Tonight.
Yeah, so can I have a motion to approve the 2023-2024 LTHS Student Handbook as presented?
So moved.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Alvarez?
Yes.
Member Vita Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member O'Leary?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Our next items are informational new business items. First, we have the 2022-2023 end of the school year report with Dr. Jen Tyrell to present.
All right. Thank you so much, President Aubert. So it's a really exciting night to be able to present so many accomplishments that our students achieved with the support of our outstanding staff throughout the 22-23 school year. The experience for our class of 2023 concluded on May 31st at commencement. I think we can all agree that it was a beautiful commencement ceremony. Throughout the course of the last couple of months, we had outstanding celebrations of our class of 2023. They had a beautiful prom, a wonderful senior honors night, and a gorgeous commencement, and their accomplishments are significant. So based on the scholarships and awards submitted to us by May 5th, the class of 2023 reported that students will utilize $16,023,000 toward future educational goals, and I've said that number many times over the course of the last couple of months now, but it's just awesome, and that number's fluid. It may even be more by the time that they're done accepting those awards. From an academic standpoint, the class of 2023 had 23 national merit commended students, 10 semifinalists, and 9 finalists. 10 students from the class of 23 were named National Hispanic Recognition Scholars, 115 high honor status students, 196 Illinois State Scholars, and over 90% of the class of 2023 will continue post-high school education at 2- or 4-year colleges, technical schools, apprenticeships, or the military. Really special class, and we were thrilled to be able to celebrate them so much over the course of the last couple of months of the school year. From a student activities standpoint, I know that we celebrate our activities on a regular basis here at LT, but I think it's important to note that we have 130 activities and athletics that span all different types of clubs, co-curricular efforts, includes intramural programs, and you've all seen our beautiful shows, performing arts, concerts. Our students time and time again say that their participation in co-curricular and athletics is a highlight for them in their LT experience. If we don't have something, our students, there's a process that students can propose a new club, and our students say there's something for everyone, and I say there's multiple somethings for everyone. Preliminary data finds that 80% of LT students participated in at least one extracurricular activity. And I was talking with Mr. Geddes, our activities director, Mr. Gardner, who hangs with a lot of activities folks, and they really haven't heard of schools that hit that 80% mark with respect to participation. We're always going to set our target higher. We always want more students to be involved because we know the benefits of co-curricular participation, but that number is significant, that 80% of our students participate participated in at least one. Almost 60% participated in 2 or more activities or athletics, and almost 90%, 89.9% of students took part in at least one element of our co-curricular programming, which includes athletics, intramurals, clubs, and then also special events. So I think that number represents something greater with respect to connectedness at LT. Something cool that happened on the activities front this year, on October 28th, we simultaneously hosted 2 activities conferences, student leadership conferences. I thought this was crazy. We hosted the West Suburban Conference Student Leadership Conference and also the Illinois Director of Student Activities. We plan to do that again next year, so that was pretty cool. At the IDSA State Convention, 4 of our sponsors were recognized for their achievements within co-curriculars. And then I can't share the accomplishments, events of all of our co-curriculars, but this year I'd like to just highlight a little bit of our competitive activities. Our competitive activities had a super successful year this past year, and we appreciate your support, the support to be able to send our students not just to state level competitions, but national level competitions as well. Those are experiences that students gain so much from and take with them for the rest of their lives. So Business Professionals of America, 20 students qualified for state in 26 events, with 12 students in 13 events advancing to the national conference in Anaheim. Our chess team had a really successful year, finishing the year with a 21-14 record, took 5th at sectionals, tied for 9th at state, which was 21st after tiebreakers, and that was the best program finish in the history of our chess program. Congressional Debate earned 21 individual awards during the regular season, and at IHSA State Series, 4 students advanced to the semifinal round. Our math team had a really strong year, winning the West Suburban Math League Conference Championship, and they finished 11th at state. Our Science Olympiad also had a very successful year, and I believe they finished 11th place at state as well. Model United Nations had another successful season. They won 4 Best Delegation and Outstanding Delegation, and many students won gavels, which is a big deal in the Model UN circuit. Our robotics team, we had multiple teams compete at the state level, and a couple also qualified for the national competition that was hosted in Iowa. Our speech team had another successful year, and we had a duo. Our DDA team actually finished second and brought home second place state medals. Our steppers were invited to perform at the United Center before the March 17th Chicago Bulls game, and they were so impressed with that group that they've already been invited to participate in next year's event, so that's exciting. They were a special guest at Brook Park Elementary School's Spirit Assembly in March. They finished top 5 in 3 of their competitions, and then ultimately went to nationals in Newark, New Jersey, where they finished second. So that's an awesome year for our step team. Winter Guard won a second straight 3A tall flag state championship, and it was their 3rd in the last 4 years. So as you can see, our competitive activities had an awesome year. Our other activities had a great year too. We host innovative events. Our cultural clubs meet on a regular basis. If you look at the calendar on a daily basis, it's hard to find a day where there's not multiple things to pop into, whether it's a regular club meeting or a special event. But I just wanted to highlight some of our competitive activities. It was another successful year for LT athletics as well, and I kind of want to highlight a different thing by each season. In the fall, we had 4 teams finish in the top 10 in state. Girls swimming and diving, 9th place. Football advanced to the quarterfinals and finished in the top 8 in 8A. Boys cross country and girls cross country both placed 7th, so it was a really successful fall. Within the winter, we had multiple teams qualify for state-level competition: POMS, bowling, boys swimming, competitive cheer, and Special Olympics basketball. Our white team finished the year in 4th place in the state, and blue team finished the year in 3rd place in the state. And I'll say that was one of my favorite events of the year, traveling down to Bloomington and supporting our Special Olympics basketball team. Dr. Waterman was there as well, and our students had an absolute blast and just wore the LT across their jerseys with extreme pride. In the spring, we brought home our first state trophies of the year, and again had multiple teams qualify for state. We had a bunch of sectional champions. It's hard to win sectional championships. Badminton, boys gymnastics, who ultimately ended up finishing second in the state. Boys water polo, who ultimately finished third in the state. Girls track, boys tennis, and boys volleyball, who finished second in the state, all brought home sectional championships. So it was just, our students had another wonderful year in our full scope of our co-curricular activity and athletic programming. And as I shared last year, and will share hopefully every year that I'm able and proud to give this report, supporting our students and having a front row seat to all of the things that they do and the passion that they bring to their experiences on the court, on the stage. Everything that they do is an absolute pleasure and honor, and it comes with a lot of support from everybody around this table. But they did a wonderful job, and it's my pleasure to have a front row seat to all of their accomplishments this past year. One more thing that I forgot to mention, I think we had 45 students. Our music program had another amazing year. 45 students were selected for ILMEA district ensembles in band, orchestra, choir, jazz band, and jazz choir, and 10 were named all-state musicians. Had the opportunity to put those medals around their neck at the festival at the Festival of Music earlier this spring, and that was awesome, because those are students that don't just make music, but they make magic on that stage. So it was a wonderful year from an academic standpoint, from a co-curricular standpoint, and athletic standpoint as well. We're going to miss the class of 2023, but appreciate the contributions that they've had here at LT. So thank you.
I mean, obviously, huge kudos to Dr. Tyrell for supporting and championing this work, but also compiling this into a really good list that is great to memorialize.
Not as good as Matthew Welsh's, but, we're working on it.
No, I think sometimes we lose sight of that, right? All this stuff happens throughout the year, but to be able to see it all in one place, all of the academic, athletic, and extracurricular accomplishments is awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
So exciting. It really is, and I love your statement about lots of somethings for everyone.
There are.
And you're at all those lots of somethings too. So I know I hear from parents and students in the community constantly about how much they appreciate all the things that we do, but also seeing you there and seeing your support of all the amazing things our students do. So I mean, thank you so much for all that you do to inspire our students and to be there and support them for all of these amazing accomplishments.
Thank you. There's a lot of parts of my job that I like, and there's none that I love more than that. Just supporting our kids and seeing them carry out the things that they love to do and that they're passionate about. And it means a lot to them, but it also means a lot to me to be able to be their biggest fan. So thank you.
I've had a student. This will be my first year since 2013 of not having a student here at LT. Wow. And coming up in the 2023 and 2024 school year. And I'm always amazed at when you go through all the different things, how many, like I took some notes because I heard some new things that I didn't even know we did here, because there is so much. So that's just amazing. And then one of the things that we've talked about as a board, and Brian and I had the opportunity to touch base on it, that I'm really excited about, I know you're looking into. I just wanted to, it seems like a good opportunity to mention it here for next year, is having more student spotlights at our board meetings throughout the year, so that some of these things that we can hear about at the end, that we're actually going to hear about during the board meetings, which, I mean, whenever we have our student report, that's such a grounding of why we all do this and why we're all here spending a lot of hours and passion and energy toward LTHS and making it the best place it can be for every student who walks through our doors. So that's super exciting.
Absolutely.
The only thing I'd like to add, and again, your commitment to our activities, our school, our function, all of that. My own kids say that, brag about your energy, and I think that's important. But I also want to highlight, some actionable data. What you had talked about with that 80% of LT students participating in at least one extracurricular activity, that's a very high number. And we talk about the need for a sense of belonging for our students to feel connected to schools. We're doing panorama surveys to really get that information, and I live in that panorama data in my own job. And sense of belonging for a high school student, typically nationally normed, is pretty low. So I would love to see how and if that translates into what that panorama day comes out to be in the spring. But I just think that 80% number is outstanding. And I think we need to continue to try and capture that 20% to bring them in. I know we're at 89.9% for involvement in at least some other activity, which is amazing also. So I think the work that you're doing, everyone is doing, is wonderful in that area, and just continue to encourage us to push ourselves to be even better.
I'm just going to add that I can't, it's amazing to see on the social media where you are every single day. Do you know what I mean? And even having been at events where you're like, I got to go because I got another event to go to.
Thank you.
So it's really, you really are the spirit.
Our calendar is crazy here at LT, but it's fun. It's fun to try to get to as much as possible. And honestly, before I became a principal, I was involved in athletics growing up, but I've become so much more of a fan of everything, and it's been awesome. I've learned so much, and I have so much appreciation for all the things that our kids do. So thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Kids had a great year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final informational item is summer of 2024 bond sale financial information, and we're going to turn it back to you, Brian.
Thank you, President Aubert. So we have talked at length over the last several months regarding the projects, the summer 2024, starting summer 2024 bond sale projects. Tonight, we're going to begin the process of discussions related to the actual bond sale itself. And so we want to talk through some of the information here coming up, or what will be coming up. And one of the items I would like to point out to the board is that if you look on page 176, we have sort of a timeline of what is going to take place here and how it needs to take place. And so if you look at that timeline, we look at June 20th, which is tonight, we're talking about what's going on. However, we have a bit of a unique situation this year, and this happens every several years, with the fact that we don't have 30 days between our August board meeting and our September board meeting. So the bond sale will require 30 days between the August and September board meetings. And so actually will our budget. This also happens with the budgeting process as well, because that also requires 30 days. So really what I wanted to point out here is that we will really begin the process during the committee of the whole meeting on August 7th. In which we would hold a public hearing for the bond issuance. And then once we have that, we would publish the notice of intent in the local newspaper the week of August 9th. Then we would get back to the regular board meeting on September 18th of approving that final resolution. But at that August 4th committee of the whole meeting, both this public hearing and actually the budget public hearing will take place as well to get us those 30 days. I'm doing it that direction because I think we want to avoid having a special board meeting for just those items. It doesn't really seem to make sense to bring everybody back together for just those items. So that being said, I wanted to bring that to your attention just in case there were any questions about why we're looking at the August 4th meeting and why. Sorry about that. August 7th meeting, thank you. About why we're talking about the August 7th meeting, the committee of the whole meeting approving those items. But again, there will be two at that meeting that we will need approval for. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. That being said, we have with us tonight Elizabeth Hennessy, Managing Director at Raymond James Public Finance. Elizabeth, how long have you been working with the district?
Since 2003, 2004.
2003, 2004. So Elizabeth has executed several successful bond sales for the district, and we're looking forward to working with her again. As I said in the executive summary, Elizabeth is one of the leading professionals in this arena. So we're happy to have her here tonight. And what she is going to do for us is she's going to kind of take us through some of the information here. Again, none of this will be set in stone, as I mentioned in the summary. These things will continue to change. There are many factors that go into this. I'll let Elizabeth talk about those. But most likely what we will do is issue a resolution with the intent to sell up to $27 million of bond proceeds. And up until the day of the sale, that will actually change, but we'll at least have that resolution to cover us up to $27 million. So that being said, Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I'm talking a little too much. Why don't you go ahead and take us through the information that we have here?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me tonight. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, welcome.
So if you go to your board packet, I'm going to give you a brief update on the bond market. We went from August of 2020, which was an all-time low in interest rates in the middle of the pandemic, to now on our seventh or eighth interest rate increase. Even though they pressed the pause button last week, it does look like we're going to have 2 more rate increases ahead of us. So interest rates have really gone up, especially on the short end of the yield curve. You see that 1-year Treasury kind of at the top there. If we go to the next page, though, I think this puts it more into perspective. The red line is where interest rates are now, where you can see they're higher in the short term, but lower in the long term than they have been historically. So the average since 1993 is represented by the black line, and you can see that really from a historical point of view, the longer term rates are still lower than the average over time. Page 169 looks at the bond issue, the bond payment that you have outstanding, and that's from the 2013 bonds. That $9,540,000 was matched with a 2014 issue of about the same amount for $20 million back in 13 and 14. As Brian mentioned earlier, consistent with the board's policy, whereas you can pay bonds off over 20 years, the board has taken the conservative stance that they want to pay them back over 10 years, so that every 10 years you can go back and do this again and help refresh your capital facilities, and giving future boards flexibility. So then after that bond payment is made, you will be debt-free. Page 170 looks at your statutory debt limit, which is huge, $239 million. That is your statutory debt limit. Page 6 looks at a subset that's called your working cash bond limit, and that's another statutory formula. That's $107 million. But that amount is even further dwarfed by the amount you can issue under tax caps. And that's the type of bonds we issued in 2003, 2004, and then again in 13 and 14. These bonds are called limited bonds. They're paid from the debt service extension base. If you look at page 172 in your board packet, you see starting on the left side, we've got the equalized assessed value. We've got the percent increase decrease, the debt service extension base. That number goes back to the year 1994 when tax caps came to Cook County. And it said that whatever your bond and interest payment in the year 1994 was, you could continue to issue bonds as long as that payment did not exceed that amount. Then in 2009, they added a CPI factor to that. So today, in the 2023 levy year, because we know most likely that that's going to be a 5% CPI, your debt service extension base, or the amount of debt you can pay off a year, is $2,839,604. We're assuming in 24 CPI is going to be 4%, kind of just based on how things are trending. After that, we go down to 3% and 1.5%, just to be super conservative. We really don't know what's going to happen out there. We can look at the various projections, but we want to be conservative on that. So moving across the page, you see the remaining levy year 22 payment from the Series 2013 bonds. And then you see that debt service extension base is open to you here in 23. So you have the ability now to issue another bond and pay it back with that debt service extension base. And importantly, this extends the payments that the taxpayers have been making. It only increases them by that CPI factor, so that 8-9 cents that they have been paying on bonds will continue for the next 10 years on this next bond issue. Let's go to the next page, 173. This is just a graphic. It shows the levy year payments of 21 and 22, and the line is representing that debt service extension-based capacity with the CPI assumptions we just reviewed. So if we go to the next page, we see the proposed bond issue, extending that debt service extension base for 10 years, and that generates a bond issue with proceeds of $25,674,000. So 25.7 million, give or take. It's based on today's interest rates plus a cushion of 50 basis points. The district's very fortunate. You've managed your finances very conservatively, and for that, Moody's or Standard & Poor's has in the past awarded the district the AAA bond rating, which is the very highest bond rating possible. So I don't see a reason why we would not maintain that bond rating on this next issue. And depending on interest rates, we may be able to even get more than the 25.7 million proceeds out of the 10-year payback, depending on interest rates. So the next page, which is 176, Brian already mentioned, tonight we are discussing the plan of finance and the schedule. July 17th, we're going to publish in the newspaper a notice of a public hearing that's going to be held on that August 7th meeting. This is the process set forth by the statute for the issuance of non-referendum bonds. And the district is taking the most transparent way possible by starting out with a public hearing, telling the community you plan to issue hopefully up to 27 million of bonds. And then after that, the board will have a action item to approve a resolution of intent to issue up to 27 million. After that, the public notice of intent will be published in the newspaper starting a 30-day petition period. If within those 30 days, 10% of the registered voters, which is currently estimated at 5,328 people, sign a petition and submit it to the district, that would force the issue to go to full referendum, the next, which would be March of '24. So that's the public process. That petition period process will happen in August. Then on September 18th, once the petition period is completed, we would provide the district with a parameters bond resolution. So that would be the last legal action for the board to approve the bond issue. We would have our rating meeting with Standard & Poor's and sell the bonds in October with the approval of the board delegates, which is typically the board superintendent, or the board president, and the CSBO, Brian, and Brian superintendent. So that's how the sale would happen. And we do it with a parameters resolution. Given the market being so volatile, we want to make sure that we're in the best position to issue the bonds, take advantage of that super strong AAA rating. Then, once the bond issue is closed, the levies go on the tax rolls, then the money goes into the working cash fund, transferred to the capital projects fund, just at the same time you're getting your construction bids in, ready to go and be spent the next spring and summer on those construction projects. And at this point, are there any questions on the process or the bond issue? Sorry, I went kind of fast, but I know you've got a big agenda tonight.
A couple of things I'd like to add to this. First of all, we will most likely end up amending our budget because we will have to have a budget in place by the end of September. So all of this obviously will, the actual sale will take place after that. We will then have our bids in and whatever projects we decide to move forward with. So much as we did this year, I suspect we will end up, amending our budget again once we receive the bond proceeds and have the projects in place. Secondly, this also does require me as the treasurer to purchase a separate surety bond to cover the cost of, to cover essentially the administration of those bonds as well. So while I have a regular surety bond for the district for all of the funds that we handle on a daily basis essentially, there will be a second surety bond that will be involved unless that process has changed, Elizabeth. I don't think that it has.
The good news is the percent that you need is gone down from 25% to 10%, so it'll be a little cheaper for you.
Yeah. So those, we will have to do that as well. And Elizabeth, could you just quickly touch on the negotiated sale versus the bid sale. Would you just briefly
Sure.
touch on that?
Sure. So because the district is rated AAA, we are recommending, as your municipal advisor, a competitive bond sale. When you have that high of a rating, that type of sale for an issue that's of 10 years or so is really going to garner some very competitive interest from other broker dealers. So people like Robert Baird, Harris BMO Bank, Stifel Nicholas, those various firms will bid on the bonds. Our firm, Raymond James, will not in our role as municipal advisor. And we will evaluate those bids and take the lowest interest cost to the district and award that to the lowest bidder.
Perfect. So there are those two options, negotiated versus the bid sale, and in this case, we would be looking at that bid sale for selling the bonds. So, that being said, again, we will be putting this in motion prior to that August 7th meeting with that publication in the newspaper, and then we'll be proceeding from there. There are times when I think market conditions, again, I think there are a few of these dates, the November 7th, close the bond issue, that may be flexible in terms of when that actually happens. I was involved in a bond sale in my prior district where we had a date set and then the market conditions were not conducive on that particular day. We ended up waiting some time. Those kinds of things will happen as you go, but nonetheless, we'll, obviously the goal is eventually to get to that point.
Thank you for outlining this, and, you know, it's something that I think we are all very cognizant of, but it can't be said enough, that the district has been very prudent in its spending. You said it tonight. We've had, in our audits, that is something that we hear time and time again, about the prudent and high integrity spending and our conservative budgeting. So that's wonderful to hear, and that really sets us up for the best success that we can have going into a bond issue. So, I mean, that's just great news. Great news, and lots of things.
It was existing before I arrived here, but that AAA bond rating is there aren't many school districts that have that, right, Elizabeth?
Very few.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really something to be proud about and to recognize as often as we can. And it may have started before you were here, but you have been very integral in making sure that that continues along with all the people that you work with. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that September 25th date certainly makes me a little nervous, but, you know, because we want to maintain that. And, you know, we're certainly going to do our best to do so.
Don't disappoint.
I know. I know. No pressure.
Right, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion on that? Nope. Okay. All right, we have now reached the point of our meeting where we will review the consent agenda. Our consent agenda includes the following items: payment of bills and financial statements for LTHS and LADSI, including 2024 fiscal year budget information, human resources items for LTHS and LADSI, business services, reappointment of treasurer position with the new board, and approval of depositories and signers, stipend committee recommendations, review and approval of the meeting minutes, open and closed sessions, and overnight student travel request approvals. Can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Marilyn, will you please call the roll?
Member Bader Daniels?
Yes.
Member Dillon?
Yes.
Member Thomas?
Yes.
Member Alvord?
Yes.
Member O'Leary?
Yes. Okay, as mentioned earlier in the meeting, the board will not be going into closed session this evening. Can I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, everyone. Have a great meeting. Have a great meeting. Let's start now.